Good evening. I'm Carol Pachetti and I'm the chair of the Needham Finance Committee. We are holding this meeting in a hybrid mode. Any citizens listening in the line will be able to listen to the meeting, but won't necessarily be able to participate in the meeting. And I call to order this meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. Agenda item number 1, are there any citizens on the line? There's no one logged in. Okay. Great. Approval of minutes. Do we
have minutes from June 26th. Carol, John, Barry, and Joe were there.
okay?
So I've read them. I have no comments, and so I move their acceptance.
I'll second that.
And I will also accept the minutes. So Joe is not here.
Right.
That's all we have for minutes. Okay. So moving on to the town manager budget consultation. We're moving right along.
Just in time.
Welcome back.
It wasn't even 7.
I know. Sorry.
Oh, this is great. I'm only upstairs. Sorry, mine said 7.
I could be wrong too. Right. How is everybody?
Nice.
How are you?
Great. Nice to see you too.
You too.
Great summer.
Always too short.
How was yours?
Yes, lots happening this summer. So yeah, it's good. It was very good. So mostly I'm here to hear from you. If you have feedback for us before we talk to the departments about their budget submissions for FY26. Just couple of items. We're refocusing on our sustainability target with the level of inflation that we've had. It's been difficult, so we're really trying to look at what we can do to get back closer to that between 4 and 4.5% sustainability target. We're really emphasizing particularly anything new or any changes, how they relate to goals that have been set. The select board set goals. Many of the other elected boards have set goals. There have been ad hoc committees that have done plans. So we're really going to try to tie anything new to things the community has come forward and said that these are the things that they want us to be focusing on. And I think we're feeling sitting here in September that FY26 might be a tighter budget year than we've seen in a couple of years. So
And what
that's how
are
we're heading in.
what are the stressors in your mind?
I think the stressors are, there's a lot of money drying up federally, right? So all that ARPA money, it has made funds available from the state for certain things that we've been able to use, and it maybe has made them state aid, a little bit looser because there's been all this funding. A change in administration is can be a shock to lots of things, government structures, systems, the economy. So we don't know what to expect there. A lot of the things that we rely on continue, the prices aren't coming down. The stickier on the way down. So a lot of those things not coming down, and the cost of, we have some contracts that are up in FY26 that are unknowns for us. So. Dave, would you add
Yes,
anything?
basically along the same lines, the other concern is that the demands on the state may increase depending what Washington does in the next year. And hence, as the town manager was saying, there may be tighter reins on state aid to cities and towns because of that. And the other aspect is there's still some concerns that we could be looking at a recession. It seems like every month that things are wonderful and great, and then the next month it's doomsday. So there's just a lot of volatility, and volatility makes it more difficult for longer term planning of revenue streams. federal and state resources.
Sorry, I. Stopping because I started the meeting and, now the webinar. is official. I didn't know, the meeting had started, but not the webinar, and now that's officially started as well.
Any thoughts about new growth and,
Are you recording?
whether that could be, a challenge for FY 26 or any different in FY 26 than in prior years?
There is a slowing down, but I'm anticipating that for FY 26, that's gonna be impacted as where property values and activity is going through in January 25. So that's months away. So a lot of the year has already gone by, so it is slower. 2025 is a little slower, but it's not a dramatic drop off. Where we'll see the impact is probably gonna be in 27 in terms of the much lower, in terms of much lower new growth activity. Because it takes a year, 18 months to catch up to in terms of activity. So what I'm saying is the building permits and everything has been already pulled. That's our 26 new growth coming along. But with the slowing down, 27 would be a little more problematic. So again, to what Tom Andy was saying, the sustainability is trying to plan for a tighter revenue stream for the next few years will be prudent.
In theory, if we pass this Communities Act, right, there'll be more potential for housing development. Potentially, which may mitigate some of that.
But not FY 26 or
No.
27.
No.
Yeah.
So teachers' contracts up this year, that's the big one, right? They're-
And police. Doesn't it feel like we just did it?
I know. But they're 3-year contracts, right?
Right,
When we did police, I think we did 4. We did
Or, yeah.
1 and, yeah.
but just given
It
what's
ends in
happened in
25.
other towns, do you have any sense with the teachers in particular?
No, I haven't had any conversations with them at this point. Yeah, sure we will. I mean, with the schools, I haven't had any conversation.
Maybe just how's so far the integration of the IT integration? I know you're only 2 months into it. So officially, at least as far as the budget's concerned, although more months into it as far as sort of de facto. Is it progressing the way you all are hoping it would?
So from an operational point of view, we have a group of 5 of us who've been meeting very regularly to scope out the interim guidance for how the new ticketing system and the new computers will be deployed through the system. So we've been working on that. I don't know from a budgetary perspective, Dave, if there's anything.
There isn't been much activity. But I think it's slowness in terms of the transition from processing the bills to the school department processing the bills, because there's some invoices I know should already be paid and getting the budget, but they haven't, and that's just companies updating their files to properly direct the bills and such. So that's a long way of answering is too early.
Yeah.
Okay,
Was the memorandum of understanding between the town administration and the school administration?
We did an MOU between the select board and the school committee, and that was finalized. So, the schools, I think we talked about, had a more robust structure around, certain things. For example, we're following their lead where we're working on a structure where every type of employee, every position has a designation, and that has a designated equipment that goes with it. So we're finishing that before we deploy the equipment. And so it's a lot more structured from our perspective, and it's been really helpful. So if you're somebody who sits in an office, you get this monitor and this laptop, and then we'll start rolling it out once that's complete. So, and they've rolled out the ticketing system, which employees are using to make requests, and then we're finalizing guidance now to put in for the FY 26 budget, whose budget things come out of. Cell phones come out of this budget, keyboards come out of this
Then
budget.
it gets really serious.
Yes, then people will be like, oh, now we know how to do it. Be good. We're very encouraged by it.
And how about, the schools had when we met with them in June and July, had a pretty significant turn back of unspent funds, mostly because of sort of the churn on personnel side and not being able to fill positions or only filling them for some of the year, not all of the year. Have you guys experienced a similar phenomenon, and or have you sort of done a dive on where FY 24 ended up as far as what, in a sense, wasn't spent because you didn't have positions filled either in full or in part, and so that's the first question. And then based on that, what are you currently experiencing as far as are you full? Are you have open positions? Where do things stand overall on personnel point of view?
So I can tell you operationally, we are closer to full than we have been in the last few years. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Dave can talk about. Some of the challenging positions that we have tend to be licensed water personnel, licensed trades personnel. Those are challenges for us. And particularly in public works, we have a lot of succession planning. So we'll have a vacancy and then everybody moves up and then we're filling the bottom vacancy, and so we have that. We have started our recruitment for police officers through the new non-civil service, and we've had more candidates. We have 47 applicants for a position at this point. Yeah, it's fantastic. And
That's
so
awesome.
that will really be speeding up to the extent we get good candidates. They still have to go to the academy, so you have to wait for that in both police and fire, but we'll be starting fire very shortly, but we already started police. Dave, do you have a sense of where we had the
It's,
turnbacks?
some of the departments that have had larger turnbacks, are less, particularly in public safety. Because of the difficulty they had in filling positions, so their turnbacks are less, but the overall numbers, I won't have that until the end of September.
Okay. That's what I thought was the case, but I do think when we meet with them, when you talk with your departments about their next year's budget, part of the discussion, I think should also be sort of just a look back at the prior year, and if there were holdbacks, what the causes were, and are the things that need to be addressed or changed to prevent that happening into the next budget season we're going into. So if you guys could just make a note of that. I know you don't have the numbers yet, but I'd like to get them thinking about that.
We do. And the sad truth is, if there is a recession or moving toward a recession, we have better retention.
Right,
So
right.
Well,
it's not really a great thing, but it is a fact.
From an employee standpoint, it actually works to your benefit. In terms of even being able to fill positions, so I think.
So hopefully that will happen. That's good feedback.
That's all I have.
anybody else? Karen? Tina? All right, great. Thank you very much.
Think of anything else, you know where to find. me.
Okay.
Uh. Dave,
Hey,
stabilization funds.
yeah, debt services, so. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
So, as the committee is aware, the town has, several, special stabilization funds. And, one of the, stabilization funds that, we're looking, to revamp, provided the finance committee also is up in mind, is the, debt service, stabilization fund. The, chart that I've, sent you shows current, which is what the rules are now and what, and how the fund was set up. And the yellow concept is what we're contemplating. When the debt service stabilization fund was first established, it was meant to, when we did feasibility, financial feasibility study for some multiple large projects that were going to be funded. There were years that we were looking at, about 4 or 5 years, where if we were funding the projects based on the estimates that we were using for interest rates and assuming the projects were going to go forward, that we would exceed the 3% level. And just for a reminder, the town has two policies. First policy is that general fund debt within the levy limit, within recurring revenues, would be 3% per year. And that's how our planning strategy for capital financing is done, understanding that that's how that process works. And then there's a secondary goal, which is that the town will strive to keep total debt service, that's enterprise fund debt service, that's CPA debt service, even though it didn't exist when that 10% level was determined. But it's captured in that override debt and then general fund debt, that you take all those revenue streams that strive to keep the total debt service at 10%. The debt service stabilization fund was focusing on that 3% debt for those few years that we were looking at, that we potentially would be exceeding our 3% level. And we would use the fund to basically pay down the debt so we don't exceed the 3% in those years. As fate have it, process worked, and we did not need to draw on this, partly because we didn't do all the projects that were listed there. Secondly, the interest rate assumptions, as the longer members know, tend to be conservative, and therefore was estimated higher than the interest rates actually came in at. We now know that we're looking at several projects in the next few years that, if the town does move forward, will be taxing on the demands of the town, both within the levy limit, particularly the public works based approach, which would be funded by debt in a series of years, meaning multiple town meetings. And then we have the Pollock Middle School project that is demanding about a number of $300 million gross number. And even with state assistance on that program, it's still going to be very, no pun intended, taxing to finance that annual debt service cost. We also know that after Pollock, Mitchell is still there, looming to be addressed as well. So it's in consideration of that, looking to revamp this stabilization fund to broaden the base of it, to talk about looking at using this to get us through times where we would be exceeding the 10% or the percentage that found it being an appropriate level, be funded by the operating budget. On those years that it would be higher, that we would use this fund to pay down the debt to keep it at that and not to exceed that ceiling number.
So when you say pay down the debt, we're talking about not the servicing of the debt, but we're talking about.
Short-term financing and paying it off rather than rolling into a bond.
Mhm.
So, so with that, of course, to do this, how are we going to put funds aside into put the funds aside into the debt service stabilization fund? We didn't have any specific plan. There was with the current plan, it was just basically if we find new sources of revenue, we would add it to the debt service stabilization fund from time to time. Here, the recommendation would be to earmark and appropriate an amount of free cash certified by the Department of Revenue. And the amount of free cash that's certified this year that is greater than the prior fiscal year, that we would and that we would appropriate those monies directly into the debt service stabilization fund, with the plan that that would be done prior to the close of each fiscal year.
So only if free cash is above the prior year?
This is the first part, is recommending that that would be the so-called recurring revenue stream that to the basis of your question, it wouldn't happen every single year, but generally just through inflation. The amounts increase. The other thing is to designate certain new growth revenue that may generate in the future years. Now, not the new growth that's going to generate from, we got an extra 5 houses built in town, or even if even the PMBTA guidelines being adopted and the multi-family housing creation, what additional tax revenue that may generate, that would still be basically the recurring new growth revenue that we finance and pay for education, public safety, health and human services. I'd be looking at a larger project, and the focus would be the former Muzzy Ford site.
Mhm.
That's really the last sizable parcel in town that could generate a significant amount of revenue when it rolls open. So when we get to the time, and we're certainly thinking, I'm certainly thinking, and I can see anything there for another 2 or 3 years. But something like that could be the new growth revenue that generates could be earmarked into the appropriated to this debt service stabilization fund. So those are the two concepts
So you don't want to work backwards from the standpoint of figuring out what our debt service needs are likely to be as a result of these projects. How much we would want to then create in this fund to be able to keep it under and make it a priority within the budgets of those years.
That's the other thing, is I would be looking at a target where we want this fund to be minimally is 2 years of the general fund debt service within the levy limit, or 5% of the total general fund revenues, whichever is higher. So
Okay.
currently our target is $4 million. And set basically when we created the fund. This right now, that formula, if this was the year, would be 12,640,000. But as the target would increase each year, because obviously the revenue streams. What I did is I did a look back, that if we had,
Joe has a question.
Joe is online and
Sorry to interrupt, just, this is really a question for my own education. In addition to these sources, whether it's excess free cash or some portion of new growth revenue, is there latitude in the future if there are other financial policies or fees that could be assessed for certain activities that could be also another source to fund the debt service stabilization fund? Or are we limited to, I guess, kind of self-contained, we have to pull from, existing budget dollars? Like, do we have the latitude to assess other fees in other programs to help with this? I'm just, it's from my own understanding. Does that
It's a-
question make sense?
yes, it does. It's a good question. We do have latitude to appropriate any monies, because there would be a town meeting action each time to appropriate the money. I was identifying methodologies in terms of determining an amount to appropriate to the fund every year. But to your specific question, any funds, unless restricted by law, and it's a certain funds, but not material. May be appropriated by town meeting into the fund.
Okay.
But just, because you did mention about a new fee or something. We would not be able to assess a new fee specific to this fund because it's, the fee has to represent the cost of doing something, like we created one with the stormwater stabilization fund, the pollution, but that's specific, it's specific fee to offset the cost of a specific purpose, whereas this is to any purpose that we can legally borrow for. So discretion, but the important key is it's not limited to just these concepts.
Thank you.
And Dave, I know the target presently is 4 million under your scenario that would move to 12.8. What's our actual amount in the fund right now?
The actual amount is, it's,
Million change.
oh no, it's a couple. $2,376,000. Thank you. So, what I did is I said, well, what if we have done this 5 years ago, you know, on the backside using that content? The, I was showing what the certified free cash was. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the other thing I forgot to mention. To ensure that we're not doing any double counting and such, there's an adjustment that if looking back at these years, free cash that was not appropriated, but actually rolled back to fund balance and then got recertified into the next year. We would back that out and doing the comparison of how much the free cash actually increased because you didn't increase by the amount stated. You increased by new dollars. The new dollars. Or in other words, if explaining it is, if we, as we're showing right here, FY 2020. Certified, the $12,369,898. Well, $4,507,426. That was free cash that wasn't used in the prior year, was rolled over. So technically, the new free cash that resulted from the activities of the prior year was really $7,862,473. Is that?
So is that the adjusted free cash?
That's
Is that
the
what you're
adjusted,
talking
yes,
about?
the adjusted free cash column.
So
But
this
it-
policy we're starting, we're starting this policy, if we implement this policy, we're starting a pretty high base of free cash. I mean, that's somewhat even unprecedented, and so if we're talking about the only way, well, at least this policy will appropriate money to this fund. You know, I guess it's hard to imagine free cash continuing to rise meaningfully.
Just from inflation, buys bigger dollars, but
Yeah.
it's not buying more things. But as I said, I looked at it at a 5-year period. In this case, in the first year, FY 20,
Mhm.
we would not have made an appropriation. Well, we would not have a dollar amount to recommend to appropriate based upon the
Got it.
aspect. And what did we actually appropriate that year? The debt service stabilization fund? Nothing.
Mhm.
The next year, again, there was a free cash of 16.6 million. but 5.1 million of it was a rollover, so the adjusted basis of free cash or new free cash was 11,526,630. Which means the delta between those two is 3,664,158. That would have been the recommended appropriation into the fund for fiscal 21. And what did we actually appropriate? None. And then the next year would have been 3,117,000. What did we actually appropriate? None. FY 23, again, showing that sometimes it
Mhm.
goes down. There would have not been a recommended amount to appropriate, it would have been none, and of course, we didn't appropriate anything. And just this past year, this past town meeting, we would appropriate $2,807,933. So just over that 5-year period, sticking to this methodology and assuming that no other additional appropriations were made, we would have had 9,589,000. Which compares to the target right now, 12,640,000, so we've made some good progress to it.
It also doesn't answer the question that I started with, which is how much. But when we have a sense of how much these projects are gonna be and when they're gonna be. When we're gonna be borrowing money, how much will we need at that time?
And that's part two, and that is that there is support of this concept.
Okay,
And then when I prepare the facility financing
Yeah.
plan, which we will have for this upcoming budget season during this winter months, I would be incorporating this and showing years that based upon the assumptions that this fund would be relied upon. In that forecasting, I would also do a forecasting with free cash as well. And I would show not only the estimated debt service costs, I would show the estimated, the amount of pool.
Right.
And how much may be pulled from the pool in each year. So that would come if there's support to explore this concept.
But even if, irrespective of whether there's support or not, you still have to do you're still doing the facility financing
Oh,
plan.
I would do that.
And so you're gonna know what the need what you're going to need,
True.
right? To maintain the 3% within the
Oh,
levy.
I'm focusing on the overall number.
right,
The overall number is really what that's how
Okay.
we're looking to change this is not focusing just on the 3%, but the 10% number.
Is the mechanism that you're striking here, something that others have done, or is it a Dave issue?
Well, there, it's something similar to this, not the mechanism of funding, because it didn't exist. But when I was on the finance committee in Natick, and we were having this major expansion of Natick Mall and realizing that there was gonna be a significant amount of money coming into tax revenue. And we were looking at rebuilding a couple of schools and a new police fire station that the town administrator and presented to the finance committee. Well, why don't we not allow those funds to go into the operating budget instead and appropriating to the to reserve them so we can use them to smooth out the debt service of those projects. So I think the concept of the free cash and earmarking, that's me, but the concept has been done in other communities and it's taking a ride through Natick. We have huge complex police fire. We built it when schools were much more affordable. We were able to do those without overrides. That's what the mall avoided. I'm sorry to say, not anymore. That isn't true.
Dave, with the effective, so obviously we're looking back at what could have happened and that, but now the focus will be going forward.
Right.
But, would. Would I be stating it correctly that what we did instead of deploying I'm just focusing on the $9.5 million number.
Yeah.
Instead of deploying the $9.5 million over these past 5 years into the debt stabilization fund, we deployed those funds elsewhere. To either fund projects, whether it's Emery Grove or other places, so we sort of put it into things. So to speak, as opposed to putting into the fund, would I be stating that correctly?
Well, actually, in those years, because of the amount that rolled in, we didn't even use the money. It was, if the money was not appropriated, it was just recycled.
Yeah, but next year, we're not gonna have 9.5 million to put into it.
Oh, correct, I'm sorry, that's just what it added totals over the 5 years.
Right, if we had done this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what it would have been, but I think what I was just trying, just to understand in my own head, but instead of doing it, we use the funds, but we use them elsewhere, either deploying them into projects or other things.
Well, certainly.
Is that 9.5 isn't sitting there right now somewhere?
So, that's correct, that it doesn't exist. You would build up the fund. Each year, like, once we know what, which they'll have a general sense at the end of September. The turnbacks and everything, what we potentially are looking at for free cash. For the FY 26 budget season. And we would know how much that is different from the FY 24 free cash certification.
And then we could use this formula. To use in this formula based on those two numbers, which you'll get to see what that would result in. For the decision to, do we want to appropriate that next May to this fund?
And again, the formula stuff is, the question's always, well, how did you determine the amount? Well, why are we putting this amount into the fund? And this is why I think having a formula. The formula, and what's the basis of determining the number is helpful. In terms of explaining to town meeting and in terms, and as well as in terms of planning. That if we're going through the budget cycle, and free cash hasn't been certified, and we don't know what the amount is. Well, we do know that once it is, to the amount that it comes in. Comes in over the amount of the prior year, that we would already know that, well, the plan would be to appropriate that to the debt service stabilization fund.
So this would, from a timing perspective, since free cash flow isn't necessarily certified by,
Has to be certified before town meeting, and we can't appropriate it. But sometimes, like this past year,
It
we did
wasn't.
not, it was like just a couple weeks before
Mhm.
town meeting. And hence we
Rolled over.
rolled over a sizable amount of free cash, so. We would have been able to appropriate that to the debt service stabilization fund, and then the town meeting members said, well, why are you appropriating that amount? He'd be pointing to, this is the methodology that we're choosing, that we're thinking is an appropriate amount to get to our goal, to have the fund at a level to smooth out the impact of future projects that we may be contemplating. And the reality is, we know, we may not know the exact year public school is gonna be done, but we know public school is gonna be done. And we may not know what the actual cost of that project is gonna be right now, but we do know it's gonna be more expensive than any project that we've done today. So it's not as though we're not gonna have those demands on the town, and this is an approach, I think. I'm trying to make it easier for town meeting members to appreciate how the numbers are coming. Make it easier for the town in terms of planning for its capital needs in the future, as well as it's a good sign to the rating agencies. That again shows what they keep saying is Needham is always managing their funds and setting aside reserves for, basically risk management purposes. Because, once you borrow, you have to be able to pay the debt, and what they're concerned about is, do you have the resources to pay the debt? And what if you have a tight year, what you're gonna do? And this is exactly the type of fund that does, is seen favorably from them, which of course maintains the town's AAA rating, which, borrowing at AAA, no matter where interest rates are, it's gonna be less expensive than it is at AA, which is good rates, which is better than an A, you know, which is better than a B, so, maintaining the AAA gets you the best rates.
Adopting something like this also eliminates a criticism that you're doing something random later on.
Right.
Correct. You can point to a methodology.
So-
One of us will have to explain.
Right, so is there anything you need from us on this right now, or,
Just a sense of the committee that, that they think this is worth exploring and doing, then I would, be with the select board and go over the whole process with them. The actual changes to the fund, because you also, we would have to modify the language of the debt service stabilization fund from that which it was originally adopted. All that would be done in May of 25.
I just worry a little bit that when we, again, focus more on what the actual need is gonna be at the time, when we have a sense for that, there's not a huge delta, you know, between what this process would have us set aside versus what we think we'll ultimately need.
Yes, but the plan is not to have this empty because I don't. think-
No, I'm not saying we should have it empty, I think it's important to know what we think the ultimate need will be, and to make
Yes.
sure that this will, obviously, it's gonna make progress to getting there, but just if it's enough.
That's also true, and then we can also
Right.
explore, again, to the point is. A suggestion of, a sizable redevelopment of the Muzzy site.
Right,
And revenue generation from there, or something else that not aware, as Joe was mentioning. Was mentioning earlier is, are we limited to scissors or other revenue streams? So-
no, I appreciate we can always allocate what we feel we need to have, I just want to make sure that this is gonna get us most of the way there, just so it's, so as opposed to any other methodology, that's all.
Correct.
well, Carol, I'm comfortable with this and from where I sit, so, but
Yeah, I would recommend, from my perspective, I think that you should be investigating this further. Did you agree with Barry that I think we need to know back into what the need is, just to make sure we're not, imagine we're overfunding, but that it's going to be significant enough to
Right.
matter,
Which of course, again, well, that's why it's not until May and stuff,
right?
and. By that time, I would be doing an update to the facility financing plan, which will start showing all that. But it's just, I didn't want to invest the extra time in doing that if the finance committee or the select board were not interested in pursuing. So, but I'm hearing that.
we are.
Yes.
Interested,
Anyone
and
else?
therefore. it would
Karen, Tina, I agree.
exercise. Yeah.
Joe, you
Agree,
good?
agree, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
So when will you be speaking to the select board on this?
Probably, probably the first meeting in October would be my guess. So, because the, yes, it would probably be not quick.
Okay, does anybody have any updates? at all?
Are we doing this appointment thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to let everyone know that we have 2 liaison positions that have been appointed. Or I learned a new word actually, a voluntold.
Voluntold.
So Paul voluntold should be appointed to the downtown redesign working group. And Kate, they haven't had a meeting yet?
No.
with- Okay. So
You
Paul will
got it.
be there, and then we needed a third person to serve as a school liaison, because Josh is now on the other side of the table, so, Joe has agreed to serve as the third school liaison. Aaron's still on phone, right? Or,
Yeah, I
Yep.
think,
but and Barry's on climate action, so,
Super.
and Tina and Joe are new, so I'm sure these things do come up, so, we'll just see how the year rolls along, but we're pretty, well deployed in terms of additional committees, so thank you both for agreeing to do that. And just for anybody that's, listening on the line, we're excited that we have 2 new members of the finance committee. So Tina Burgos and Joe Abruzzi. Say
Thank
hello,
you.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
glad to have you aboard.
We still need 2 more, right?
And we still need 2 more and don't think anybody's going anywhere. So, I know the moderator is working on that. So,
I saw
Yeah.
him, I saw him at South Station tonight and I pushed him hard.
Are you suggesting he's looking for candidates at South Station?
No.
Was he wearing a sandwich board?
Exactly. Exactly.
Good pension.
so if there are no,
I just had a question about sort of meetings going forward and the
Mhm.
warrant for the special town meeting and when it'll be in a position where we can start discussing warrant articles.
The warrant will be, the almost final draft will be ready and the select board will be viewing that on the 10th. It'll probably be able to get to you all, we can get it to Molly this weekend. So you can take a look at it.
the draft by this weekend? Okay.
Meetings when, the 21st, is that right? 21st,
October town meeting.
yeah.
So working backwards from there or working forwards to there, is there any sense on when or like, for example, are we projected to meet next Wednesday, the Wednesday after, or what? Just, can we maybe put a roadmap together between now and then?
Yes, I can, talk through the articles with, Molly and Carol in terms of how many. When I think they'll be ready to make a presentation.
Okay,
to
because you did say that next week,
Yeah.
none of them are gonna be ready, so we're not,
Yes, correct, because they won't, the select board's voting on them on the 10th.
right,
So, I'm thinking in earnest that the 18th. That certainly all, any of the transactional, warrant articles will be able to address
on the 18th.
on the 18th.
Right, so we'll definitely, our next meeting will be on September 18th and.
Yeah.
Taking a look at the warrant, you'll be able to decide which. The following Wednesdays after that we'll need to meet.
Okay. Great, anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. We are adjourned. Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. These MMA events that come up like that town finance committee, are we able to register?